messed up badly by staying the night with his boss. When I came back home, it was empty.
Hi guys, I'm panicking. I cannot find my boyfriend and it's making me panic. Our house is empty and all his things are gone. When I say all, I mean all. I know what I'm saying is kind of absurd, but it's the truth. I don't know what to say to you all, but I'm not joking. I don't truly know where my boyfriend is and it's making me very anxious. How does one explain that their partner just went missing? Well, I don't really think I can classify him missing yet. It's just too suspicious and I'm just too clueless. Maybe, just maybe, I could be the reason for this. I might be at fault. How? Let me tell you guys what's going on. My name is Serena and I'm a 24-year-old massage therapist. The name of my boyfriend is Nate and we've been together for approximately 2 years now. We first met when I gave him a massage and that was how our relationship began. It's been intense ever since then and we got into each other so much that we decided to move in together. Nate is an accountant and he's a very hardworking one. We decided to get an apartment together and at first I was worried about the payment because the apartment was kind of expensive compared to the very cheap one I lived in before, but Nate insisted that we take the expensive apartment. Like I told you guys earlier, I'm a massage therapist and that automatically means that I earn, but not as much as an accountant, LOL. I earn based on the number of massages I'm able to conduct. If I have a bad customer day, you can guess what happens, right? I wasn't ready to find a very expensive apartment, but Nate convinced me. If some of you are expecting me to say that Nate took over the bills himself, you're wrong. Nate is not like those men that believe a woman shouldn't spend a dime of her own money. I can very well say that Nate is a stingy man, but to him, he is not stingy. Instead, he believes that he's the perfect definition of a wise man. We split the bill on every single thing that involves the apartment. Sure, he gets me gifts and takes me out, but everything else is equally split. He doesn't believe in investing that much in a woman. He didn't tell me this himself, but I read it from the way he behaved. So if you're thinking that I caught a big fish by dating an accountant, you're wrong. Like I said, the apartment is outrageously expensive, so we didn't need to get furniture. It came with its own furniture. All we needed were our personal stuff that we wanted to add to the apartment. That's just my little introduction, guys. Let me get into the pressing problem that I need to get solved. I've honestly not slept for days because of this particular issue. I've had sleepless nights just thinking about what went wrong and why he suddenly left. At first, I tried my best to deny the truth. Yes, I had a little idea of what could have gone wrong, but I just didn't want to believe what I knew could be the reason. I still strongly believe that there's no way Nate could have found out I cheated on him. It was a one-time thing that just happened in the sour of the moment. He wasn't there, so I really do think that it can't be the reason why he suddenly left without notifying me. If you're wondering why I can't just call him, he blocked me. My boyfriend blocked me just like that, without prior notification that there was something going on. At first, I thought something had gone wrong and I was at the verge of filing a missing persons report, but I had to pause that because I honestly believe that if something is wrong, he wouldn't have the time to properly pack his things and then block me. I know most of you are itching to know what I meant by saying I cheated on Nate. I'm itching to tell you all the truth, too. I don't know if that could be the reason why he suddenly ghosted me. I don't want to believe that's why because that would mean my life is technically over. I cannot lose Nate now. It just can't happen. I love him. And even though my confession is coming a little bit late, it's the truth. I love him with all my heart, and I don't want to lose him. I cheated, and it wasn't something I planned. It just happened, and it means nothing. I need to go tell his family what's going on right now, so please bear with me, guys. I'll update this as soon as I can. Update 1. I'm back, guys. I know none of you kiss me, lol. Who would miss a pick-me girl, right? That's what kissed of you are calling me in the comments. I think it's a little bit rude, but whatever. I deserve it. I cheated with his boss, and that's not okay. But you guys are really brutal. Some of you actually went as far as calling me a 304. Are you serious? I cheated with his boss only. Nothing more. It's the first time I ever did something like that, and I truly regret it. I don't want to make this kind of mistake ever again. I went to see Nate's family, and that scenario was the most intense and dramatic thing I've ever experienced. I want to tell you all about it. But first of all, I'd like to tell you all how I ended up cheating with Nate's boss. I'm a massage therapist, and my work actually requires a lot of intimate encounters. Before you all get me wrong, I'll just tell you that I'm being honest. A massage therapist has to touch the clients and actually massage them, and it can get intimate sometimes, whether intentional or not. Only a professional can really control the narrative and make sure things don't get out of hand. If you're already guessing where this is going and you think I gave his boss a massage, then you're right. Nate has never been a fan of my job. In fact, he hates the fact that I'm a massage therapist. He doesn't like it at all. He never ceases to tell me this, and it's something I've heard many times before. I've always told him that it's not fair for him to talk down on my job when it was actually my job that led to us meeting. He came to get a massage at the place I work at, and I gave him a massage. He liked it a lot and came back a second time. He told me he got tired from working as an accountant a lot and needed to let off steam. Part of what I do as a massage therapist is helping my clients ease their stress. It gives me a very strong sense of satisfaction, and that's why I never stopped doing it. Nate and I bonded a lot during his sessions, and that's how we exchanged contacts and kicked it off. But because he was aware that sessions could get intimate, he began to get irritated with my job. I always assured him that I'm a professional and I'll not let myself get carried away. It was extremely hard to convince him because Nate is a very independent man. He doesn't get swayed easily. Have I told you guys about his nosy sister? His sister, Elena, hates me for what I do. She always accused me of cheating on him, but that's a story for another day. I never really met Nate's colleagues at work because I never really thought there was a need for that. He never brought it up, and I never brought it up because, frankly, we were both very busy at our respective workplaces. But just 3 weeks ago, Nate and I went to a party, and coincidentally, dope of his colleagues were there too. His boss at work was also there. Apparently, it was his boss's birthday, and his colleagues decided to treat him to a nice birthday celebration. Nate wasn't part of it because I'd asked him to take me to a club days before that day, and he promised to take me. I had no idea his boss was having a birthday celebration that day. I felt really bad when I found out that it was his boss's birthday at the club, and I didn't waste any time before I apologized to him. I apologized to the whole group because I felt bad for being the reason the party had not been complete. I'm just like any lady who likes to make demands from her boyfriend and then forget he might have things to do. His colleagues laughed at Kai's apology and told me it was fine. To make me feel better, they even went as far as saying I was overacting. One of the reasons I also felt bad was because I remembered that when I first asked Nate, he told me he'd be his that day, but I refused to listen to him. Nate's boss introduced himself as Cole, and then he shared my hand and told me there was no need to apologize. He asked what I did for a living, and I said I was a massage therapist. From the moment those words slipped out, I could see that Nate was kind of angry. I didn't understand why he was angry at first, but I later remembered that he hated my job and probably felt uncomfortable with letting his colleagues know I was a massage therapist. His colleagues and boss, on the other hand, had the exact opposite reaction to what I said. They seemed very interested and intrigued, and they asked Nate why he didn't tell them of my profession earlier. Some of them made remarks that suggested they wanted to come for an appointment with me, but we all laughed it off, and I honestly assumed that they were all joking. I mean, why else would his own colleagues want to book an appointment with me? Nate didn't seem to feel that way, and I realized that from the way his body language suddenly changed. He became stiff and acted quite irritated. At some point, he called his colleagues out and told them to shut up. He told them to dead the idea of getting a massage from me. That was all that happened. When we got home, I confronted Nate and asked him why he overreacted. I honestly didn't see anything wrong with what his colleagues said, and I didn't get why he felt the need to overact like that. I didn't want to be the one responsible for conflict at his workplace. I mean, I was the only woman, I'm the kidst of boys. It's normal for some of them to get too excited and make funny comments. Nate made me understand that it was disrespectful to him, and he couldn't let it slide. I didn't say anything further because I didn't want to offend him. That was the end of the matter, and I wanted it to be that way. It was just a joke. That was the honest idea I had in my head, and I didn't let my mind travel elsewhere at all. That's why it was quite confusing for me when I realized that they are not actually joking. At least Cole was not joking at all. I was extremely surprised when I saw him at my workplace. It was not something I expected at all. I mean, YSL about plot twist, right? I heard Nate's colleagues making the jokes, but not once did Cole even comment on whatever they were saying. That's why he was the last person I expected at Key Workplace. Nah, if you're wondering how he knew where I was working at, I mentioned it at the club in my introduction. Before some of you come to the comments to call me a pick-me girl for doing that, let me make it clear that I was just trying to help myself and my company. We also work on commission, and if I saw a dozen men asking me where I worked, I'll call the name too. I'm not the only massage therapist working there. The other ones can massage them, and that's why I did what I did. So when I saw Cole, I walked up to him and asked what he was doing at KI place of work. I was genuinely intrigued and unwanted to know why he came there. He told me he had a stressful day at work and wanted to let off some steam. According to him, he'd never tried getting massaged by a professional before, and he thought it would be nice to stop by and give it a try. He told me he wanted to patronize the place I worked at, and that's why he came. Cole kind of caused some disruption at my workplace, and when I say disruption, I mean the good kind of disruption. He's a good-looking guy. In fact, he's very good-looking. I don't need to hide what I actually know is true. Some of my female friends were attracted to him, and they didn't hide it. But, unfortunately for them, they had other clients they were working on. I was the only one that was free. I tried getting out of it, but I would have lost my job if my boss or any of my seniors found out. I left a customer waiting when I had nothing to do. If just finished with a client and was the only available massage therapist. At first, I pulled Cole to the side and genuinely asked him to insist of waiting for the other massage therapists. But he told me he couldn't do that because he had to be somewhere urgently. I had no choice than to massage him. He left that day after giving me a $50 tip. I was surprised because that was a lot, and I even rejected it at first, but he insisted. When I got home that day, I couldn't bring myself to tell Nate that his boss had showed up to my workplace. What's worse, I gave him a massage. I knew that Nate would have lost his it and we would have gotten into an argument. I thought it was just a one-time thing, so I decided to keep it to myself. I also felt like there was no need to tell Nate because I was just going my job. As a professional, I didn't think there was anything wrong. I'm just doing what was required of me. I've been a massage therapist for a very long time, so I didn't think it was something that needed to make me feel nervous. 1 week later, I got yet another visit from Cole. It was surprising, but I had to do my job again. The only difference is that at the end of the day, Cole and I ended up going to his apartment. Yes, now you all can call me a pick-me girl or 304. Things escalated, and I did what I never imagined I'd do. It was very crazy, and I never imagined that things would escalate as much as it did. At first, it was just a normal session, but then I can't even bring myself to say the words out. We're not allowed to take things to another level during our sessions because it's greatly prohibited, so Cole invited me to his apartment. I got infatuated with his looks ad vaura, and then I got carried away with the way my colleges swooned over him. I think it's right to say that I let myself do something very stupid. We slept together, and I ended up cheating on Nate. I felt like a hinge bucket of ice water had suddenly been poured on me when everything was done. I realized that I'd cheated on my boyfriend with his boss. Yes, that crazy and stupid at the same time. At first, I wanted to tell Nate, but then I remembered that just the thought of giving his colleagues a massage had angered him. I had to ask myself how he'd react when he found out that I slept with his boss. No. I couldn't do it, so I decided to keep my mouth shut. Cole also told me to keep it a secret. He told me it was just a one-time thing, and I shouldn't feel scared of Nate finding out. He promised me he'd keep it a secret if I promised to keep it a secret too. Of course, I agreed to keep it a secret because there was no way I had any intention of revealing the truth to Nate. Who am I kidding? He would have left me that same day if I opened my big mouth and told him the truth. I knew who I was married to, and I was very well aware of the fact that Nate was a no-nonsense man. He's not what most ladies describe as a gentleman who is deeply in love. Nate uses his head more than his heart, and that's why when our rent is splittered, I knew I was not in a fairy tale relationship, so I didn't dare think I was a Disney princess that was irresistible and couldn't be dumped. I got home that day and acted as if nothing happened, even though I was going through a lot of guilt. I just tried my best to keep my cool and pretend like everything was fine. So, it was quite surprising for me when I came back home just 1 week ago and didn't see Nate. It was very weird. I was so lost in my guilt that I didn't even notice that Nate had started acting distant. I didn't even notice until right now as I'm writing this. I just got home that day and cooked dinner ahead of time like I always did. Nate usually came home hours after I did because he closed late from work. I waited for close to 7 hours and he didn't come home. Yes, I'm not joking. I got so shocked and worried that I started calling him, but that's when I discovered he had blocked me. I checked out bedroom hoping he'd kept a note for me, but there was nothing. The only thing I saw was the empty closet. I didn't even notice that his side of the closet had been empty before. Everything was gone. I thought I was going crazy, but no, it was true. I tried calling 2 of his phone numbers, but I was blocked on both. That's it, guys. He just ghosted me out of nowhere. For the first 5 days before I eventually decided to put this on Reddit, I didn't think it was because I'd cheated on him. I never imagined the possibility of him finding out that secret of mine. But when I wrote this on Reddit, I realized that there's every possibility he eventually found out the truth. If I still had doubts, his family cleared me up. I told you guys I went to see his family at the start of this update, right? Well, it didn't go well at all. So I went to see Nate's family so I could tell them what was going on. It was already 5 days and I didn't hear anything from Nate, so I thought it was right to speak to his family. I didn't want to speak to them before because I didn't want to raise alarms, but things had gotten out of hand and I thought it would be important to let his family know. Well, his family literally gave me the shock of my life. They were so cold and unwelcoming that I almost ran away the moment I stepped foot in their house. I told you guys his sister hated me, right? Well, she liked the opportunity when she discovered that I'd messed up cheating on Nate. Yes, she was aware. I didn't need to tell them I cheated before they knew. All I said was he was kidding from the house and I couldn't reach him on his phone. But they already seemed to be aware that Nate and I were no longer in contact with each other. It felt like they'd even been expecting me in the first place. His sister called me a lose girl and told me she always warned Nate that dating a massage therapist was only going to lead him into deep regret. She called me a woman with no real job and asked me to leave their house. I tried talking to Nate's mother and asking her to tell me if Nate spoke to them, but she also seemed to hate me. When his little sister and brother didn't spare me a second of their time, I was sent out of the house just like that with no progress on where my boyfriend is. Even though I now know that Nate is aware of my cheating scandal, I can't help but ask myself, where is my boyfriend? Update 2. I don't have a boyfriend. I've been dumped. I'm single. I guess you all saw this coming, right? I'm sure it's not something that cuts across as a surprise to some of you. I had it coming, and I guess I was aware of that all along. But I chose to pretend like reality wasn't setting in at all. If you're wondering what finally brought my karma, I did that myself. I suspected that Nate was back to his former apartment because it just didn't make sense that his family knew about what happened without him when confronting me. I knew that meant he didn't go far and had to be in town. I went to his old apartment, and I bumped into him just before he left for work in the morning. Thankfully, I knew the exact time he left for work. I never considered going to his workplace because I didn't want to be embarrassed by seeing his boss and colleagues who already know what happened. Nate was very cold towards me, and he was extremely rude. He didn't give me time to speak. He just told me it's over and that he was done with the relationship. According to him, he couldn't date someone that cheated in him with his boss. I pleaded for him to tell me how he found out, and it turns out he had some of my colleagues at work keep an eye on me. After Cole's birthday celebration at the club, where some of his colleagues voiced their interest in getting a massage by me, he asked some of the people he was familiar with at my working place to tell me if something fishy happened. You guys remember that Nate was a regular at my workplace before, right? That's how we met, so he had friends there before. They were the ones that told him that I massaged Cole twice and also left work with him. I guess I was really sloppy to have forgotten that everyone knew me as a married woman, and to have also introduced Cole to my colleagues as my husband's boss. Apparently, Nate confronted Cole 3 days after he got the information, and he recorded Cole's answer. Cole foolishly told him the truth after Nate tried threatening him and intimidating him. Nate then went ahead to report Cole to the HR department before he packed his things and left the apartment. If you're wondering why he didn't just tell me to pack out, it's because our rent was already due. He didn't want to renew it, so he left. I foolishly renewed it with some of my savings 3 days after Nate ghosted me because I thought he'd eventually come back. So yeah. I'm broke living in an expensive apartment by myself. Let me not forget to add, single. After Nate told me everything, he warned me never to contact me again. Just yesterday, I got from a friend of mine that after Nate reported Cole to the HR department, Cole denied his allegations. The HR then summoned both of them again, and that's when Nate provided the recording of Cole admitting to sleeping with me. I told you guys, Nate uses his head all the time, right? He intentionally refused to give the evidence at first because he was very sure that Cole would deny everything. If he had just accepted, the HR would have either asked him to apologize or asked him to stay off work for some weeks. But since he first lied to them, and then he was proven guilty with evidence later, he was demoted to a lower department because his behavior was tagged to be triggering and prone to disrupt work productivity and a peaceful working environment. I heard Cole couldn't take the shame of getting demoted, so he resigned to save his ego. Well, that's none of my business because I guess both of us got what was coming for us. Even though I hate myself right now and I regret my bad choices, I'm happy Nate got his justice and didn't have to keep working with the man that slept with his girlfriend. I'm deeply sorry for causing him that shame and embarrassment, and I regret my actions every single day. But I guess it is what it is.
My husband and my affair partner teamed up together and ruined my life. I know I did wrong by cheating on my husband, and I take accountability for it. I wish I could rewrite all the wrongs. I regret every bit of it now. I was deceived and also dumped. My affair partner, whom I trusted so much, decided to make my life a living hell. Now I'm currently served with divorce papers and left with nothing. Hi guys, my name is Mirabelle, and I am a 27-year-old entrepreneur. I owned a store where I sewed clothes and sold them. I had always dreamt of being independent and doing what I love. I have passion for my job, and I design most of my outfits. I also have people working for me at my workshop, and I'm married to a software engineer, Frederick. He is 27 years old. My husband and I have been married for 5 years now. We have known each other since college. We started off as friends when we were in school. I met Frederick at one of the annual school events that year. We started off like friends. It was a mutual feeling for me, but for Frederick, he was more interested in getting to know me more. We eventually started dating and went out together. We studied together during exam periods and did a lot of things together in school. As high school lovers, we went to school parties together, concerts, and we had fun. While we were in school, Frederick was a responsible guy. He was very careful anytime we went to those parties. And that was one of the things I loved about him. He is so gentle and kind-hearted. Those that knew him in school loved him because of how coordinated he was, and he took his studies seriously. We had a big social circle among my friends. Some of them had boyfriends and girlfriends. Frederick and I were an extension. We all hung out together and, most importantly, studied our books. 1 year later, we all graduated from college. Frederick and I then decided to move to Virginia, where our family was based. From there, he started introducing me to his family and all his friends. I was invited a couple of times to his home to have dinner with his family. It was a family of 4, Frederick's parents and his sister. It happened that Frederick's mom and I shared the same name. We also had a lot in common. Frederick's family were very welcoming. I got to know more about each and every one of them. Being the only sibling that Frederick had, he was very protective of his sister Leah. Frederick never jokes about anything that has to do with Leah. Leah was also kind-hearted just like Frederick. Their mom Gladys was also nice to me. She treated me like her second daughter. She didn't give me any reason to complain about anything. She always made sure I was very comfortable anytime I came around. Frederick's dad also was not an exception. They all treated me like I have known them for a long time. I also introduced Frederick to my family. They loved Frederick as well. I am from a family of 4. I have one sibling just like Frederick. I have a brother and his name is Jason. I love Jason a lot because he's more than a brother to me. We shared everything together and made memories. We were like besties. Everything really moved fast between me and Frederick. Both our families met on several occasions for dinner dates. We were like the perfect match. Our families were also in support of us coming together. I felt happy because I have found someone that loved me unconditionally. Before I met Frederick, I was unlucky with dates. Most of the guys that I had met only came to play around, but Frederick was different. I loved how he noticed every little detail about me. I was very happy to be Frederick's girlfriend. After a few months of graduation from college, Frederick then proposed to me to be his wife, which I accepted wholeheartedly because I loved him so much. Our families made arrangements for the wedding. They handled everything and did what was supposed to be done. I was happy that our families came through for us. The day of the wedding came and we tied the knot together. It was attended by both families and friends. It was a simple wedding. Everything went well and there was no drama of any kind. The wedding came to an end and everyone returned back to their respective destination. Frederick and I moved into our new house a few miles away from our parents. We started a new life as a newly married couple. I was happy to do life with Frederick. A few months of our marriage was blissful. We continued all what we did when we were single. We went out together and also attended a lot of family gatherings. Frederick got a job and he worked to fend for us. Not long after he got a job, I decided to chase my dreams and I opened a clothing store. I have always had a passion for sewing clothes and designing my own outfits. My store was moving really fast and everything went well. I get a lot of orders every week. I couldn't do the job myself because the workload was overwhelming, so I decided to employ some staff to help me out in the store. I also employed some staff that could also sew and design men's outfits. Not long after, my store was now a unisex store. My husband also helped me in putting things in order in my store. He also helped me with the marketing strategy and gave me a lot of exposure. What started like a small business grew into a full-blown one. I made outfits for my husband and his colleagues at work. I also made some for my family and even Frederick's. Everyone supported my business in the little way they could. A few months after I opened my store, one of my college friends, Diana, was getting married. I was very happy, and what even made me happy the most was that she gave me the contract to make the outfit for her bridal train. It was a huge contract, and so I dedicated a lot of time to it, and all the girls that were on the bridal train looked beautiful, and they also loved their outfits. Some of them even patronized me after the event was over. My husband didn't stop helping me to get more audience for me. Frederick was very supportive, and he took his time to make sure I was very comfortable while doing my job. Yes, guys, Frederick was working at his own workplace. He is a software engineer. His work didn't take much of his time, so he always comes back early from work. Sometimes I was the one that often stayed out late at night because of the kind of orders I do get. I have to meet up with them and also make sure that my customers are satisfied. And most times, Frederick was the one that did make the meals we ate and also took care of things at home. Sometimes, when I didn't get back home early, my husband would call to make sure I was okay, and waited for me to get back so we could go to bed together. There were times I went out of town to do work, and I stayed for a week or more. My husband never complained because he knew about the nature of my job. One day while I was at my place of work, my husband called me that I should come back early so we could have dinner at home. I told him that I would try to close up early, which he agreed, and we ended the call. That day, I planned everything and promised not to disappoint him. Unfortunately, when I was about closing the store, a customer walked in and said he wanted to have a shirt designed. It was an unfamiliar face, yet looked so handsome. I hurriedly declined because I didn't want to disappoint my husband, but he was persistent and pleaded with me to help him out because he was going to attend an event the next day. Our dinner was to start at 8 p.m., and he came around 7 p.m. I agreed because I had about an hour before the dinner date. As at the time he came, all my staff had already closed from work. I dismissed them early so they could rest that day. I reopened the store and ushered him in. I watched him while he walked around the whole place. He looked pleased with what he saw and commended my efforts. A few minutes later, he walked up to me and told me the type of style he wanted. I took out the fabric and started working on it. We talked about a few things before we introduced ourselves. He introduced himself as Derek, and he stretched his hands for a handshake. We shook hands, and I also introduced myself as Gladys. He went further and said that I had a beautiful place. I was happy about the compliment, and I thanked Derek. Derek told me about the work he was doing and how he recently moved to our town because of work. While I was working on his clothes, he kept on talking about a lot of things. He talked to me like we have known each other for years. Meanwhile, Derek and I were just meeting for the first time. At some point, I didn't pay attention to him because I got tired. He was engrossed in the conversation. I kept looking at the time all through to see if I could get home on time to meet my husband. But I was stocked up with the work. I tried calling Frederick to apologize ahead of time, but his lines were not reachable. At that point, I couldn't stop what I was doing, and I didn't want to disappoint Derek, because I had started working on the fabric already. He was a first-time customer, and so I didn't want to give him any reasons to complain. 2 hours later, I was done with the work. I gave it to Derek, but he insisted on giving it a try there, in case of any adjustment. I showed him a room where he could change. He entered the room, and I hurriedly packed up my things, ready to leave. Few minutes later, he came out. I was very happy about the dress, and also complimented my handwork. Honestly speaking, guys, he looked smart in that dress. He went back and changed into the normal clothes he came in with. I gave him my account details, and he wired the money plus an extra pay for taking my time. Derek offered to take me home, but I refused and told him I could manage. Before he left, Derek gave me his private card and told me to call him if I needed anything. I was hesitant at first, but I collected it. He also promised to come around after he got back from the event he wanted to attend, and he drove away. I was very happy because I delivered what he ordered and even gave me an extra tip. I checked my phone to see what time it was, and guess what, guys? It was 10 p.m. I was so shocked. I felt really bad because Frederick had taken time to prepare dinner for the both of us. I stood for a while before I was able to get a cab. While I was on my way home, I kept trying my husband's lines, but still not reachable. I kept on praying that he won't be angry with me for not keeping my promise. I got to my destination and I paid the cab man. I headed to the door and knocked. I knocked for a while, but no response. So I used my spare key and opened the door. I opened the door and met my husband deeply asleep. He must have waited for me, I thought to myself. I proceeded to the dining table and I saw that Frederick had prepared different meals for us to eat. I couldn't wake him up, and so I went to change into my nightwear. I was sad, guys. The next morning, I apologized to him and promised to make it up to him. From the look on his face, I knew that he was very angry about it, but chose to let it slide. I quickly went and prepared for him that day. I made breakfast for us, and we headed out to our place of work. I got to my store and saw that my staff had already started working. I was very pleased with them. They were very hardworking and didn't give me any reason to complain about anything. A few weeks later, Derek showed up to my store again. He told me how everyone complimented on the dress I made for him. From there, Derek and I became close. He often came to my store to have his clothes done or to keep me company. We hung out a couple of times together outside my store, from coffee dates to movie nights. We kept our personal life private, or should I say, I kept my relationship status private from Derek. He never asked if I was single or not. At that point, I was just having fun and didn't see the need to tell him. But Derek told me that he just got out of a broken relationship at that time. I felt bad for him because he was such a handsome guy that shouldn't be heartbroken by any lady. So guys, I didn't tell Derek that I was married. We kept on going out together. I did it in such a way that none of my staff knew what was going on between us. We kept on meeting at secret places to hang out together. Derek knew how to make a lady comfortable. He bought me a lot of things and also took me out to a lot of concerts. Before I met Derek, I forgot that I loved going to parties because of my hectic work schedules. But Derek often advised me to work less and party more. He also said that that's why I employed staff. They are meant to relieve me of my workload. I agreed with him and I left the work for my employees to handle while I went out with him. My husband didn't know about Derek or my secret affairs. At that time, I didn't see the need to tell him because I was just relieving myself from work. And also there was nothing serious going on between Derek and I. Few months after Derek and I started dating, he asked me if we could travel out of town to go see places. He promised to be fun if I agreed to the offer, but I told him to give me time to think about it. I got back from work that very day and met Frederick on the couch watching TV. We exchanged our greetings and I headed to the bathroom to change. I came down after a couple of minutes and went to eat dinner. After I had my dinner, I was about to go up when Frederick called me and told me he wanted to discuss something with me. I nodded and sat down and asked him what it was. He looked at me and asked me if everything was okay and if there was anything I'm hiding from him. I was confused at that moment because I didn't understand what he meant by that. I told him that everything was okay and he didn't stress further. I tried asking him why, but he said he was done talking to me. I got annoyed with the way he responded, and I told him immediately. Before I could understand what was going on, Frederick had fumed up. He yelled at me and told me to leave. I left angrily and went to bed. A few minutes later, I was over what had transpired between me and my husband. The thought of Derek came to my mind and I felt happy again. I slept off thinking about him. The next morning, I made up my mind that I was going to the trip Derek offered me. I told my husband that I was having a business out of town and I would be back in 3 days. He agreed and I left for Derek's house. I didn't pack much so it won't be suspicious. I went to his house and we were set to move, but he got a call from someone. I didn't know who it was and I didn't bother asking him. A few minutes later, he walked up to me and told me that something had happened. I asked him what it was, but he didn't leave much details. He told me that he needed some money to sort out some things. He asked me if I can lend him some amount of money and he promised to pay me back as soon as he gets the money. I agreed because I knew that he was capable of paying me back, and again, that was his first time asking me for money. So, I told him to give me an hour to arrange for it. Our trip was canceled and I headed back to my store. I felt disappointed because I wanted to hang out with Derek outside our town. I went to my office and did some calculations and called Derek to send his details. A few minutes later, I wired him the money. He called and thanked me. I started sorting out a few orders and got to work with my employees. A few days later, I called Derek to hear from him. I haven't heard anything from him since the last time I wired him the money. I wanted to know if everything was okay with him. He picked up the phone and I asked if everything was okay. He said yes and would come see me in a couple of minutes. After getting off the phone with him, my husband walked into my store. I wasn't expecting him because it had been a while since he came to see me at the store. Frederick walked in looking sad. I asked him what happened, and he told him that there was an emergency at his workplace and he needed some money. He explained that someone tampered with the figures at his office and he's at the verge of losing his work. I felt sad for him, and at the same time I was helpless because it hadn't been long since I gave Derek money. I didn't tell my husband because he would be very angry with me. So I made a few arrangements to help my husband out because I didn't want him to lose his job. I was able to come up with something, and I gave my husband the money. I told him to keep me updated with things at his office. He left immediately, and he called me to tell me that he would get back to me soon. Not long after my husband left, Derek came. I asked him about what had happened a few days ago, but he looked like someone that wasn't in trouble. He told me that I shouldn't worry about my money, that he would pay back in a couple of days. I didn't think twice about it because I knew that Derek would pay me back. So guys, after Derek left my store, I made arrangements to close the store. It was 5 p.m. that day and I wanted to get back home early to know more about what went wrong in Frederick's workplace. I drove home and opened the door. Immediately, I entered the house and noticed a piece of paper on the center table. I didn't pay attention to it because I thought maybe it was my husband that had left it there. I went upstairs and freshened up. I went downstairs after a few minutes to call Frederick. I kept on calling him, but no response. I sent him a text message to know if everything was okay, but he didn't respond to any of my texts or calls. I went to the kitchen and prepared something for myself because I was very hungry at that time. I finished eating and decided to go watch some movies. I saw the white piece of paper and I thought of opening the paper to see what it was. Guess what, guys? It was not just an ordinary piece of paper, guys. It was a divorce papers. Update. So guys, Frederick served me divorce papers. He signed the papers, folded it, and placed it on the place I would be able to see it. Attached to the divorce papers, there was a written note from my husband. In the notes, Frederick stated that he knew about my infidelity and acted like he was ignorant about it. Not only that, guys, my husband also said that he knew Derek. They both worked at the same place. They teamed up together to scam me of my money since I decided to play them both and also with their emotions. My husband also wrote in the letter that I shouldn't bother calling him or even looking for him because he had signed the divorce papers and left the town with the money he and Derek scammed me of. I was reading the letter and didn't notice when I fell on my knees. I cried bitterly. My husband had taken the worst revenge on me. My life had been ruined because of that revenge. The money I gave both my husband and Derek was from my business. I didn't know what to do. I tried calling both their lines, but it was not reachable. I went throughout that night. Update. Guys, it's been a month since my husband got divorced. All means to reach out to him were in vain. I discovered that he had blocked my lines and also blocked me on all social media platforms. Apparently I got to know that Derek and my husband were co-workers. It was a few days ago that my husband told me all about what happened. Derek was recently transferred to my husband's workplace a few months ago. The time Derek and I were getting to know each other, he only told me that he had recently moved in because of work. I didn't bother to ask him the type of work he was doing. On the other hand, my husband had seen Derek coming to see me at my store a couple of times, and he decided to follow us to all the places we went to together. He called Derek and told him that he was going out with his wife. Derek didn't know that I was married because I kept it away from him. He was so angry and brought up the idea of scamming me. I don't know what to do right now. My business is crumbling. All the customers that ordered for designs are requesting for a refund because I haven't been able to meet their demands. I'm currently owing a huge amount of money because I've used all the money I had. I have sold most of my things, and it seems like the figures keep adding up. I tried calling Derek, but he had already blocked my lines. He didn't return the money I gave him, and my husband is not even planning to see me. I have made a very big mistake by cheating on my husband with a total stranger. Derek scammed me and ran away with my money. I really messed up. This is my story, guys. Goodbye.
Need advice? Our divorce lawyer is someone I have a past with. Now I am in big trouble. Hey guys, it's my first time here on Reddit, and I'm here because I want to share a story with everyone. I also need help, so if you would please read this, I thank you, and I'll want your advice at the end of it. My name is Valerie, and I am 29 years old. I had an affair with my divorce lawyer. I know it's crazy to believe, but every time I think about it, I tell myself it's real. I am soon to be divorced, and my husband and I had planned to fix our relationship. Now, I know we can no longer fix it anymore. My husband's name is Greg, and he's 32 years old. I met Greg when I was in high school, and I was 17 years old then. I don't know why, but we hit it off immediately once we met. Greg was a caring guy, and I didn't see any flaws in him because he felt perfect to me. We dated throughout high school, but his family weren't doing okay financially. He tried getting jobs, but that didn't help much either. I told him I can help since I came from an above-average family and we were okay financially. He told me he didn't want help from his girlfriend, but he was really grateful. By the time we finished high school, I remember Greg was no longer cheerful since he was worrying about what to do next and how to help his family. I kept asking him why he didn't want my help, and he told me he wasn't comfortable. He said he was the one that's supposed to take care of me, not the other way round. I tried telling him I didn't care about the money issue, but I guess it was just a man thing. At one point, I couldn't meet up with him again, and we didn't see each other most of the time. I hated the fact that his pride was trying to come in between our relationship. I talked to him about it again, and he told me an uncle of his who was overseas called him to come work for me. I wanted to beg him to stay, but I knew that would be extremely selfish of me. He gave me one last kiss and told me to wait for him. He also said he'd understand if I wanted to find someone else, and he didn't want to tie me down. I told him I was going to wait for him no matter what it took. Greg also said he would be keeping in contact with me. 3 years passed, and I was 20 years old by then. Greg had been keeping in contact with me as promised. Throughout the years that we were far apart, he kept informing me about how things were going for him. He told me about the work. I can't disclose it here, sorry. But it was bringing a lot of money for his family. I was happy to hear, even though I wasn't happy about the job. I told Greg I missed him, and he said he missed me too. I asked Greg about when he planned on coming back, and he told me very soon. I loved Greg with all my heart, but my feelings kept fluctuating because he was far away. There was a time I dated a guy during the 3 years that had passed to fill that numb feeling I had, and I had slept with the guy then. I felt guilty, and it felt like I was cheating on Greg. I didn't tell Greg about it because I tried to keep the memory at the back of my mind. I didn't know that the memory would come back to haunt me. Another year passed and I turned 21. By then, I had already moved out of my parents' house and rented my own place with the help of my parents. I didn't want to depend on my parents forever, so I decided to find a job. I didn't go to college because I didn't see the use. I was able to get a job as a teacher in a school through the connection of my parents. I think the other teachers in the school didn't like me because of that, but it wasn't like I cared. The pay was okay, and I told Greg all about my own place and everything that had happened. Greg asked me where I stayed in the US, and I told him. I thought he was just asking for no reason, but one day, I heard the doorbell ring. I opened the door, and it was Greg standing on my front doorstep. I was shocked to see him there, and my emotions were all tangled up. I didn't know what to feel, and all I knew was that my love for him had reduced. I thought it was maybe because it had been 4 years since I'd met him, and the love would rekindle for him. I had to pretend like I still loved him, and I jumped on him, hugging him tight. We caught up on a lot of things, and he told me more things. He told me that he was going to open his business firm. I won't be disclosing the name. He bought an apartment for the two of us to live in. He also said that he would open a boutique for me, and I was happy about that. Along the way, everything followed as planned, and it was okay for us. Yet, I didn't feel that full love for him. By the time I turned 23, we went on one of our dates that day to celebrate my birthday. I was shocked when he got down on one knee and proposed. I was going to say no because I wasn't sure or ready, but he looked so happy, and I didn't want to break his heart by telling him no. I know what everyone's thinking, and I know what I did was wrong, but I can't go back to the past to change that. We got married by the time I was 24, and he made it a big wedding. He invited all our family members and friends. I didn't want a big party, but he was so excited throughout as we were planning it. We got married and everything worked out well. I gave birth to a baby boy and we named him after his grandfather, Jonah. Our family came around and we celebrated. My boutique business was booming and I had a lot of customers. I think things started to change when he stopped coming home early. He told me his job was getting stressful and taking most of his time. I complained to him about it, but Greg kept saying I should give him more time and he'd make it up to me. My love for him kept fading and I could see the distance set in. Jonah was growing old and he turned 2 years and I was 27 years then. The only time Jonah could see Greg was on weekends and I hated that. I tried complaining, but he asked for more time. Eventually he became free, but that didn't make my feelings for him better. He usually told me, "I love you," but it has been long since I heard those words from him. I knew he was also feeling that distance and losing his feelings for me. Jonah is 4 years old now and he's very smart. It pained me to see him walking around not knowing he had parents who didn't love each other that much. I stopped going to my boutique at one point because I got some workers to help me out there. I talked to Greg and told him we had to get a divorce because I couldn't force myself to love him. I asked him if he was feeling the same way and he said he was. He wanted us to fix it and he tried, but it was to no avail and the feelings didn't rekindle. Yet he kept on trying. One day he told me we were going to get a divorce, and I won't lie, but I felt a little bit happy. I was away from the loveless marriage, which was my fault in the same place. Greg told me that he was going to get a divorce lawyer, and he was true with his words. But I regret thinking this. The next day came, and it was 10 a.m. in the morning when the doorbell rang and I went to answer it. The shock on my face was wide because I was surprised to see the person in front. It was the man I had something with during the past. He was the one I didn't tell Greg about. I told him to come in, and I tried to compose myself to act like I didn't know him. What bothered me was the way my heart started beating fast, but not from fear, but excitement. I didn't know what to feel, but it was the same as the first time I met Greg. The divorce lawyer introduced himself as Lucas, and my husband shook his hand. I knew his name, but I acted like I didn't know him. I couldn't have the strength to tell my husband about it, and I hope Lucas said nothing about it. He sat down and he said nothing for a few seconds. My husband stood up to receive a call before anything started, and Lucas and I stared at ourselves. I didn't know what to say to him, and I'm pretty sure he didn't know either. I was about to say something to him, but my husband came back. The meeting started, and I watched as Lucas and Greg discussed a lot of things. Greg told him about the whole relationship issue we had, and that we wanted a divorce because we were falling out of love, and I felt guilty. We decided on the things I would be getting after the divorce would be finalized, and how we would fix child custody on Jonah. Lucas said he understood, and he needed 2 days to put together documents and review them before he was back. Throughout the conversation, I felt his eyes stealing glances at me. Lucas gave Greg his number, and he gave me too. The whole thing was weird because I didn't have his number anymore since I deleted it long ago. We thanked him and he left. After that happened, I received a weird text that night with just a "hey," and I already knew who it was. I texted him back, and that was how I started talking to him. That night, he said he had a lot of questions to ask me and he would love to meet up with me the next day. I was hesitant at first, but I couldn't turn him down since I was the one that cut contact with him with no explanations, and he saw me a year later, married to someone. I agreed to meet him, and I was still contemplating whether I should tell my husband the truth, but I wasn't ready. Before I went to sleep, my husband told me again that he really wanted to make us work, and he was sorry for everything he did and how he had been acting. I also apologized to him, but just at random, not for a particular thing. I couldn't tell him that I was the one that began to fall out of love in the first place ever since he traveled then. The next day arrived faster than I had expected, and I already hated the day. Greg pecked me on my cheeks before leaving, and I smiled at him. I had to drop Jonah off at the school before I went to the bathroom to clean up and get ready to meet with Lucas. The problem was that I knew I wanted to dress up for him, and I felt silly about that. I put on my casual clothes and a light makeup. I felt crazy because why was I putting on makeup to meet up with an ex? Anyways, I had contacted him, and he told me to meet up with him at a restaurant. I went there, and once I spotted him, he waved at him. I wore my glasses because I hoped none of my husband's friends would recognize me. We were both speechless after I sat down, and I wished he would say something first to break the silence. My wish came through, and he started by asking him why I broke it off then and everything we had. I told him the truth about Greg and the whole story about us, and he listened. By the time I was done, he sighed and he said he understood everything. He said he was upset with me and he felt happy to see me, and I smiled at him. The next thing he said after was shocking. He told me he still wanted something with me, but I just frowned. He did know I was married, but even though I was going through a divorce, I couldn't believe he was going to say something like that. Although a part of me actually wanted to be with him and let him feel me, and I was ashamed of that thought. I knew I was supposed to feel annoyed by what he said, but the thing that annoyed me was that I didn't. I didn't say anything, and I got lost in thoughts, not until he called my name to snap me out of it. He apologized for saying something so absurd, but I brushed it off and told him it was okay. Lucas asked me if my husband knew about us and what we had in the past, but I told him I couldn't tell him, so he just nodded in an understanding manner. He asked me if we could be just friends because he missed what we had and the way we vibed with each other. I didn't think he had any second thoughts about it, but I should have known better. I didn't even think before I said yes to us being friends again. I went home that day with a smile on my face, not knowing that things were going to take a turn for the worse. Lucas came over the next day, and we still acted like we didn't know ourselves before now. He brought some documents he had printed out and compiled based on the division of the assets. I didn't see the use in getting anything from Greg, but Greg insisted. He was going to leave me with the house, and the boutique was in my name, so it didn't matter. I also read through some documents, and it mentioned that Greg wanted to leave me with a huge amount of cash. I protested, saying I didn't need something like that, but I felt like it was an excuse to just see Lucas again. Lucas said he would come over again in some days with the finalized papers which Greg and I will have to sign. I was sad but happy at the same time, and I don't know if that makes sense. Lucas kept contacting me at night, and we texted talking about random things. I had taken Jonah to school that day and got back home. I was bored and didn't know what to do. It was like Lucas read my mind from anywhere he was, and I heard the doorbell ring. I opened the door to see Lucas standing in my front with his usual suit and the bag he carried. I wasn't expecting him, so it was awkward. He explained that he called Greg and informed him that he was coming, but Greg said he was at work, but he should show me the documents so I could agree on them. I told Lucas to come in, and he sat down. I could feel his scent lingering in the air when it passed, and it made me feel some kind of way. He asked when Greg would be back, but I didn't think he had a motive, so I told him in the evening, and we started talking about the documents. He told me to come sit beside him to look at the documents clearer, and it was dumb, I know. I listened to him, and I felt his hands brush past my thighs. He leaned in for a kiss, and I accepted it. It felt different than Greg's own. I don't know how it happened, but we were both on the bed, staring at the ceiling with the sheets over us. The guilt came back to me, and it was due to the fact that I had just slept with my ex, who was also our divorce lawyer. I knew it also meant that I just cheated on my husband because the divorce had not been finalized. Lucas turned his head to face me and smiled at me. He asked me if I didn't enjoy what we just did, and I lied to him that I didn't. It was one of the best things I'd ever felt before. He asked me if I didn't miss this because he knew I was lying. I told him to leave because I couldn't take it anymore. I had mixed feelings, but with what happened, a part of me knew I wanted to be with Greg, and I told Lucas that. I told him we should forget what had happened between us in the past and right now. I also told Lucas that if my marriage didn't work out, I wanted to get divorced happily and not have anything to do with him. Me sleeping with him made me sure that I felt nothing for him. I don't know what triggered him, but he got up and started dressing up. It was clear that he was angry at me, but I didn't do what I said wrong. He told me he wished I had changed my mind and that I was going to regret not changing my mind. He packed his things and told me he was going to come back and he would inform Greg. I didn't know what to say, and I kept quiet. The remaining days went smoothly, and I noticed that Greg was changing. He was trying to be there when I needed it, and we were discussing our feelings more. I was beginning to change my mind on the divorce because I wanted to make this marriage work. The guilt of sleeping with Lucas was still there, and I tried pushing it to the back of my mind. Greg and I didn't bother contacting Lucas again for him to come with any papers. 1 week had passed since I had an affair with Lucas. Greg and I were enjoying our time together in the living room. He had taken time off from work to spend it with me. The doorbell rang and he went to check who it was. It took some time for him to get back, so I went to check on him. I saw Lucas standing at the door with a strong look on his face. I don't know what he told Greg, but Greg told him to come in and sit down. He also told me to sit. Greg told Lucas that he was planning on canceling the divorce, but with what he heard from him, he wanted to confirm it from me, or divorce was going to happen as soon as possible. I was scared because I knew something had happened at the door, and I'll never know what it was. Greg asked me if it was true that I'd slept with Lucas. I denied it at first because there was no proof and it was just claims. Everything changed when Lucas played a voice record and I heard my voice. It was when I had just slept with him and the conversation we had. I know I messed up big time. I tried denying, but there was no use, so I told him it was true. I also said it was during our divorce, but I know I still cheated on him. I tried apologizing, but he didn't listen. I looked at Lucas angrily, but he had a tiny smirk on his face. He was happy about all this happening, and I felt like hitting his face. I knew it wasn't his fault, but mine. Lucas said he was going to leave and told Greg to contact him about the divorce if he wanted to change anything. Greg just sat looking at me dumbstruck. I think he was thinking about everything that happened because he had a sad look on his face. I told him I still wanted him, and what happened was a silly mistake, but he didn't listen. I also told him about my past with Lucas and how I'd slept with him when Greg was overseas. That made him more infuriated and he left the house. It happened 2 days ago and I wasn't able to contact him because I think he blocked me. I'm all alone with Jonah in the house, but I'm worried that I'll lose Jonah since Lucas and Greg were plotting something regarding the divorce. I don't know what to do because it feels like I'll lose everything. How do I make things better? Please help me. ***. Comments. ***. 1. ***u/Reddit user. 1. ***. Okay, you messed up big time, Valerie. What were you thinking? The moment things went wrong was when you didn't tell Greg about Lucas, and then you even agreed to meet up with him. Also, what kind of wife agrees to be friends with her? You knew what it was going to come to. You should give up because I don't think he will take you back. 2. ***u/Reddit user 2. ***u/Reddit user 1. Can you stop bashing the poor lady? She made silly mistakes and she came here for advice. Valerie, your marriage sounds great even if you were unsure of the love you had for Greg. You still tried to make it work when you felt nothing, and I feel like that's a good thing you did. If Greg ends the marriage, you should find someone else who deserves you. Don't cry over spilled milk. 3. ***u/Reddit user 3. When you mean you're worried you'll lose everything, do you mean the house and the boutique? I thought you were rich, so you shouldn't worry about that, haha. If you do want to fix things, you should apologize to him once he gets home, and maybe his family members if they'll listen to you. But if not, there's nothing you can do. Update. Okay, well, a lot of things have happened since I made that post. Greg came back 2 days after with Lucas. I was scared, but I listened to the advice I read in the comments. I apologized to Greg so many times, but he still didn't listen. Lucas showed me the divorce papers and I was shocked. I wasn't going to get any money or even the house. It also wrote that he'll be taking custody of Jonah, but I argued on that. I can't lose everything. In 1 day, so he agreed. I protested about lots of things on the divorce paper, but I knew I deserved it. I signed the paper because Greg said he didn't want to see my face anymore and I should leave quickly. I went to my parents' house and told them all that happened. They said they were ashamed of me and that hurt to hear. I also contacted Greg's family, but they said they don't want to talk to me. I left Jonah with Greg because he said he deserved to see him more than I did, and I know he was right. I don't deserve anything. He left me with the boutique because it was already on my name, but I think Greg paid them to leave because they all quit some days later and said they couldn't work for me anymore. This happened because I wasn't content with my marriage and I didn't talk about my true feelings with him. If you're married out there and not happy, talk to your husband about it and discuss it. Thank you for the advice and for reading this.